So initially I was thinking about an anecdote which seems pretty actually. I remember actually in one of the screenings for the Shoreditch Twat TV show, I received one of the most complimentary insults of all time that's ever been given to me. Somebody just stood there and said, you know what, in 10 years' time, after Shoreditch has gone tits up, basically people will stand in a gallery and they'll put your fanzine up on a wall and talk about it as if it's art, and none of them will have seen Shoreditch Twat before, but they'll all have talked to their mates as if they had, and the joke of it will be that basically 99% of Shoreditch Twat is complete shit. And he was absolutely right, and here we go. At KK last year, it happened almost 10 years to the date. Here's people looking at loads of rubbish on the walls, and I feel very uncomfortable about the whole thing, and I must admit I slightly feel uncomfortable talking about it today. I think it's one of the things that underlying Shoreditch Twat and lots of the people that were involved in it is basically self-hatred. And all of this was just like kind of a big outpouring of self-hatred, and it seems very unusual, and I'm not being self-effacing just for a laugh. It was very unusual that people would put it up on the wall and go, oh, this is any good, because actually 99% of it was rubbish. So anyway, just to talk about how it all happened, I guess essentially we were in the right place at the right time. I was running a disco in Shoreditch, 333, which at the time was, when it first launched, was quite groovy, and a year after we launched, we managed to kill off the Blue Note, which was one of our main things we wanted to do. And for a while, it was kind of one of the biggest and coolest clubs in town. It's not anywhere near that at all anymore. But so the issue was there was lots of people coming through the door, and I just felt like, you know, all these thousands of people coming in and out every week, and not really having a kind of a platform to actually speak to them, because they didn't want to speak to me on the door. Girls wouldn't talk to me at the bar. I wasn't very good at dancing. I wasn't a DJ. So somehow I needed to kind of have an extra prop to kind of impress people. So we did Shoreditch Twat. And one of the best things about it at the time was that, yeah, Shoreditch was kind of going nuts for some good reasons, some very bad reasons. A lot of chancellors, a lot of people standing around in the bricklayers' arms with trucker caps and dirty shirts and just kind of talking about being T-shirt designers, but not ever really doing anything other than just drinking beer and smoking crack occasionally. By the way, I noticed somebody's selling it right outside there at the moment, Seymour's. We can all go there afterwards. So there's that. So a big pool of talent, actually. Some not so good, some better than others. And I can talk to you in a minute. I can boast about some of the people that have gone on to do much better than me that were involved in the fanzine. But the main thing is that there was money flowing around. This is I think this is the last point before brand managers started to understand what youth culture was about. Essentially, before kind of like, 2000, 2001, I think youth culture was still pretty unintelligible to middle management brand people who wanted to flog beer and fags and plastic toys and gadgets to kids. And so they had to come to club promoters or people that run fanzines to kind of help them, you know, basically to sell their bit of their brand kudos or, you know, their brand equity, and so they could ride on the back of it. And so that's what we did, basically. We got money from Booze and Fags, Rothmans, and that's a rubbish brand. I was embarrassed to have it on the back, but there we go, Rothmans and Budweiser and Michelob for a while. I mean, we just took any money that was going. But the deal was, and I think Butt and other magazines do that as well now, the deal was that you had to, you know, we had to do their adverts for them. And a lot of the time, this was the kind of the crazy conceit of the whole thing, was that the brand managers that would spend, some of the brands actually had kind of East London envoys. They'd send in there, they'd take their jacket, their suit jacket and their tie off, and look a bit groovy and down with the kids, and come in and say, listen, we'll throw you money, just let me put a bit of bunting in your club, or maybe put our logo on the back of your magazine, and you can do it whatever you want. And we did. We basically just used to run adverts saying, you know, Rothmans, you know, is death, you know, Michelob tastes like shit, it's piss water, don't drink it. And they would still give us the money. It was almost, we're constantly trying to push it as hard as we possibly can, see how much piss can we take out of this situation. And I actually one time I bumped into some higher level brand managers of Budweiser, and they knew absolutely nothing about association with Shoreditch Twat. I was saying to them, isn't it great, you know, we're going to be on telly and we've got a show in the Barbican and whatever. You must be really proud of your association. And like, Shoreditch Twat? What? I haven't even heard of it. Because I guess it was this funny time, and yeah, they would throw money at stuff, but they couldn't actually tell a lot of their kind of upper echelons in the brand, because it was just like completely contradictory to brand rules. So we had that. But we also had massive distribution, which is the best thing. So some good level of money, Actually made a few quid out of it a few times, but we were producing 25,000 copies every 6 weeks, and we had an army, because it was essentially a fanzine, a glorified listings flyer for 333. So all we had to do for 333 was just to do 2 pages of listings of their crummy nights, and then we would, and then the rest of it we could do whatever we want. A lot of the time we would take the mickey out of, kind of cannibalising the whole thing, taking the piss out of Shoreditch, obviously, and 333 and all the DJs, and even myself a lot of the time. But yeah, the distribution, 25,000 copies every 6 weeks. And on top of that, we had this army of kids that were wandering around handing them out outside shops and bars and clubs and whatever else. And one of the little tricks we used to do is to let them think that they were, like the editors of Shoreditch Twat. Because, if you let them think that they've got kind of ownership of the thing, they would go walk around and tell all their mates, go, well, I'm involved in this really cool magazine, have one. And of course, the word of mouth goes nuts. That's the point where I kind of take leave of any ownership of what was good in the magazine. Some of the best bits about it, and really they should be here because this is a design talk, really, isn't it? It's Mike Watson and John Morden, they used to be part of a design, well, you can't even call them an outfit, it was so piss pot. They're called Bump. And they're now at Ogilvy doing Kodak and kind of Kit Kat adverts. I'm sure they're doing very well, but they've kind of taken leave on all this nonsense. But this is the kind of stuff they used to do. We always used to, one of the jokes we used to say that, that at the time, one of the reasons why we were doing it is because everything was going super slick and very glossy and very professional. So nightclubs were getting really glossy, like Fabric was opening, and that one Home, which died a death really quickly on Leicester Square, they had body sonic dance floors and kind of a toilet attendants that would give you Dracon more sprays after you've taken a shit in the toilets, all that kind of thing. And it was all becoming very, very glossy. Magazines were becoming super, super glossy as well, very professional, very polished, as everybody started to learn how to do Photoshop, etc. And we couldn't do any of that, A, because, 3cc is a complete dump. There's no way we could spin, turn that in. There was no money to make it any better. We didn't really know how to use Photoshop properly. They certainly didn't. Most of the other people, although we were learning our trades, we couldn't really write for toffee or do anything as well as we might. So the best thing to do was to basically turn that into a kind of a virtue and say, and this is a great kind of mechanism. Other fanzines do it, but maybe less cynically than we did. It was just to say, if you ever make mistakes, and people would always love to point them out that there's things gone wrong in the magazine, we just go, oh yeah, well, it's a joke anyway. We put all those mistakes in there on purpose. It's a really good get-out clause for doing anything wrong or rubbish. I guess essentially that's kind of that. This is the kind of gravy train of bullshit that we kind of rode on. The other thing was, the other kind of mechanism for us was that nobody was actually questioning a lot of what was going on in youth culture. So, everybody's starting up with blogs or websites. The internet was quite new. Lots of brand associations, lots of people rising up through the ranks and becoming very popular, like Llewellyn Bartley and all these people. And there wasn't any kind of questioning or discourse about whether stuff was good or not. Essentially, if you're in Dazed and Confused and arty, deserves its place, its validation in Dazed and Confused because it's a very good fanzine. But lots of other stuff would appear in those magazines and still does. It does never get questions, and so we thought, well, there was so many chances and so much stuff that did have to kind of deserved a bit of a reality check that, we thought that this was kind of our purpose in life, just to basically be nasty about things just for the sake of it because no one else was. I'm thinking actually I'll just flick through some of these and tell a few more jokes, and you can ask some questions because that's more interesting to hear me ramble on. As time got on and things started to snowball and people used to kind of reference it, more interesting people started to turn up and produce stuff. So it slowly became less crap and just better, I suppose. So James Jarvis illustrated with this stuff, and Airside, all the people from Peep Show like Elliot Toburn and Andrew Ray did loads of illustration. Tons and tons of really good still life and fashion photographers started doing stuff, but nobody wanted to put their name to it because it was all so rubbish. Another big thing that we were used to, running theme was obviously being nasty about Dazed and Confused, and Sleaze Nation was a running theme, that was important. And the other one was just to constantly talk about kind of the encroachment of the city, and I think at the time of Shoreditch Twat, I remember we got invited to go, something to do with the mayor's office, where they had a grand plan of how far they were going to demolish huge swathes of East London and just allow the city to get more, to push more and more into it. And I think, you can see it's happening. They had to put it back a few years because, for financial constraints. But, it's kind of, I think the axis of evil stops at Shoreditch House at the moment, but it's only a matter of time until more stuff is bulldozed and it becomes more glossy and shiny. So one of the things we used to, running themes is basically being unnecessarily spiteful towards people with money. And then, this is, I guess this is the start. We're talking about, higher level media platforms giving you validation. What happened to us, the Sunday Times did a piece about fanzines, and ours was featured, and I basically owe Bridget Verdon, the journalist who wrote that, basically the shirt off my back, because everything is snowballed there for me. And as soon as they saw that, the Barbican got in contact and said, oh, we do this exhibition called Jam, we're going to get like people doing street culture, and we're going to put it in a kind of much more, mainstream gallery environment, we can call it art. So this is what we did. We did the show, and here it is. And I guess it was bollocks. That was the thing. And I think this thing just turned up on the last day, because if you see all the creases here, we were really pissed off with the invigilators and the installation people, because they really fucked that up. It was all really badly mounted. And so we came in the morning before the show opened, and feeling really aggressive and thinking, yeah, we're really, we're so agitprop, with some red paint and a paintbrush. Basically defacing our own work, basically cutting our nose off to spite our face. We thought it was really funny at the time. I don't know if it is so funny anymore. But the good thing was, that I think probably the most valuable thing financially I've ever got out of this was that there's that box there. And so there was, in one of the there's a suggestion box with some notes there. We had on one of these pages here, basically said, nominate the person you despise the most, who you want us to slag off in the next edition of Shoreditch Twat, and we'll do it. Kind of early user-generated content here. And Tracy Emin wrote Tracy Emin on one of these and put it in there, and I've still got it. And I'm that's my pension. I don't have a savings plan, because I'm just hoping I can sell that off on something one day. But the thing is, we bottled out of it. The next issue, we couldn't bring ourselves to do it, because there's always that. I don't know if you think, when you're producing stuff in your own little bubble, you think no one's really paying attention to this. I'll put it out, and certainly the people we're slagging off won't read it. But then when you realise that they actually are, then oops, I don't know, I don't want to get sued, so we didn't do that. Things started to go a bit wrong. This was weird though, because we started doing this thing about how you should deface Starbucks, because we hated Starbucks, of course, because we didn't know why. We just read about it in Adbusters that Starbucks was rubbish. So we better go on that gravy tray, there's something more to be angry about. So we said we should deface, so we kind of put this thing up that Jimmy Tarbuck was saying, go out and take off the S's of Starbucks, and then it'll be a Tarbucks coffee chain. And the funny thing was, him and his rubbish daughter, who's not very funny on Radio 4 consistently, went on the Jonathan Ross show and did this exact same gag, and didn't even tell us, didn't even phone up and say, hey, we're going to nick your stuff. Did this whole thing about how they're going to take over the Starbucks chain with Tarbucks. And I remember sitting there with a piece of toast in my hand, it kind of like a comedy toast just dropping out of your mouth. Going, I can't fucking believe it. Jimmy Tarbuck's stolen our jokes. So as time went on, this is another cover, I guess. Yeah, this was a running theme that I used to really hate, but Bump, the designers, used to do this on purpose, it seemed. That I would turn up on the day before it would go to print and say, listen, all these images, especially on the cover, are really bitmaps and rubbish. They're not going to go to print like that, are they? And they would always go, no, it's just quark, it always shows up, images that are really bitmaps. Don't worry, it'll come out crisp when it comes. And of course, they were doing it on purpose. They'd actually lower the res just to piss me off and make sure that the images looked even worse than they really were. There was no need for it. This is the nice stuff that Bump did. They just did, I think this was their trademark for a while. They did a great show at the ICA years ago when the ICA was good, called Stealing Beauty, and there's loads of key people that were involved in that, and that's one of the things they did. London Backlash, so this was, and the problem with satire, I think Private Eye get this a lot, not that I'm associating myself anywhere near the grandeur of Private Eye, but the big problem with these things is with satire, it ages really, really quickly. So I was flicking through some different issues and thinking, what can I show you that would get some giggles? And the fact of the matter is, this was a time and a place, 10 years ago. Loads of people from the country were coming up to London to protest about fox hunting and all this kind of stuff. And our thing was like, well, we'll do like the urban backlash, and while they're in London, we'll nip off down the road down to Kent and Surrey, and we'll steal all their Range Rovers. But we never actually got around to doing it. This is something I used to do. I used to love putting myself, this is like such a vain thing, and I've learned the lesson now. I used to put myself in a picture of at least every issue, and nearly always with my trousers down. This was one that kind of didn't make. We pushed so hard to get this in the Channel 4 show, and they just weren't having any of it. And we shot it 3 different times, trying to get it to work, and they just wouldn't have it. But essentially, the idea was that this is all this more token agitprop kind of activism. Like, not quite sure what we're being angry about, but it's cool to be angry, and we don't really believe anything because we're kind of like rubbish early hipsters. So let's just be angry about anything and see if it looks good. I'm coming to the end of my presentation. This is, I think, a key example of the amount of effort I used to go through to get stuff done that was good, and then the designers would just ruin it by just willfully making everything look rubbish. So I went to great lengths to get Jack Peretti at the time. Do you remember him used to do like a column in the Guardian Guide every week, and it was such good. It was almost like a Julie Birchall thing. Every week people definitely, bought the Guardian just to read his thing in the guide. And I went through months and months and months just to get him to write something. He was like, I don't write for fanzines, this is nonsense. And I finally got him to write something. It was really, really funny. And I was too busy at the time to kind of proof check the pages they laid up. And then like Bump just went and ruined it. And I was so angry at the time. I remember throwing stuff across their studio. Going, every time I produce decent content, you fuck it up. And I thought they were doing it maliciously at the time, but after years of cognitive behavioural therapy, I realise now that actually it's not always about me. They were doing it to their own agenda, and they weren't necessarily doing it to upset me, but it used to upset me. And I guess just before the, we kind of disappeared up our own backsides towards the end. I think it was good that it finished. And this was one of the things this is when we could see when it started to go downhill, because the Channel 4 thing was starting to happen. We were starting to believe a little bit too much in our own nonsense. And one of the things we regularly get angry about other people supposedly ripping off our stuff, but essentially we were ripping off other people's stuff anyway. No one's got any new ideas, and certainly not us. So this is the point I think when we started to but then again, the annual was, I don't know if anybody got that that was a complete bite by Dazed and Confused. I'm still, bearing a grudge on that, even to this day. But I think one of the things that, it was in a funny way, it's good that it bit the dust after. It was good that Shoreditch Twat TV programme didn't get made into a series, even though we did win a Montreux Comedy Award. Chris Morris at the time was producing it, was getting Nathan Barley together at the same time. And who are you going to commission to do a series, Nathan Barley or us? He's got much bigger balls than us. But then I think it's actually good because, and it's good that we've not managed to get a book or compendium of any of the stuff we've done together, because that bloke at the start of that anecdote at the start was kind of right. A lot of it was rubbish, and it was just about a time and a place. And I think sometimes, one of our kind of maxims that we used to have on the wall was strictly small time. And you always do things absolutely to the worst of your capability and be really slapdash and not really care and see what you can get away with, but also just not to take things too seriously. I think that was the most important thing. When it got to be too big, it deserved to die. And frankly, we'd run out of ideas anyway. And so one of the last issues we did, we kind of knew the game was up, and we did like another kamikaze piss take of the Guardian Weekend magazine, and we reproduced all of the contributors, the columnists' bylines and their pictures. We didn't change anything. It was a kind of almost like a kind of a legal writ waiting to happen. And I did get phone calls, and I had to close it down really quickly. And I'm glad they didn't sue me. But actually, I'm kind of glad that did happen, because I could possibly still be trotting it out now and dining off something which was absolutely rubbish. I think it's good to kill stuff off when it's kind of in its prime, and then 10 years later you can stand in a D&AD lecture and prattle on about it for 20 minutes until people's eyes start to droop. I can see your eyes are drooping now, so that's it, finished. There you go.